Application Programming Interfaces. You may not know what that means, but the acronym API is used extensively around computer programmers. And computer programmers are very well versed in APIs and application programming interfaces. The reason for this is because APIs are the way the computer systems talk to each other. APIs are embedded in everything that we use, from your smart TV to your smart refrigerator to your cell phone. Everything is using.
Wait a minute, Jason. Even my toaster?
Even your toaster, Kevin. If your toaster is as smart as mine, which I doubt, then it is using an application programming interface. But let's find out more about that. We're going to dive deep into that topic tonight, discover its vulnerabilities, and why it is an important key to keeping us all safe and secure. Kevin, why don't you share with our audience what they're going to learn about tonight?
Well, they're going to learn a lot, Jason. This episode is going to kill. And the reason it's going to kill is because our guest tonight lives in these APIs every single day. And he's going to come spewing some truth. He is locked, he is loaded, and he is coming at you with a vengeance right about now.
Episode 5, API Security Landmines. Welcome to the Cyber Distortion podcast. We have an exciting guest with us tonight, Adam Fisher from Salt Security. And our topic tonight is around API security. We know that API security is a hot topic. Everyone we talk to in the security space is talking about the vulnerabilities associated with APIs and why those vulnerabilities are key to all of our industries doing a better job of locking down and enforcing good practices around APIs. We're going to dive into that deeper. We're going to explore why that is the case. We're going to help you even understand what an API is and why it affects all of us in our lives every single day. But before we get there, why don't we just have our guest, tell a little bit about himself. So Adam, go for it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you. I always like to say I got into security because of WinNuke 95. And that's starting to date me, bit by bit. Every time I say that, few people understand what that is, but I spent a lot of time blue screening Windows 95 computers in my way up through security, and that was a great place to start. And from there, I just kept on going, And I've been doing application security now for just about 15 years, and it got to a point where I noticed a lot of my customers, a lot of the clients that I was working with, we're beginning to use more and more API-based applications. And the solutions that we were using were not effective in protecting those applications. And, did a quick Google search or how to do something better. I knew where I needed to go. We needed specific solutions to protect applications, API-based applications. And I landed at Salt. Third employee here in the United States, 18th overall, and it's been a wonderful ride since.
Great.
Awesome. Great to have you, Adam. Really is. Well, APIs are clearly becoming more and more of a threat vector for companies today, and they're everywhere. Security's never been more important than it is today. And it's one of the biggest attack vectors we're hearing about in the news right now. And to be frank, in my opinion, there's a pretty good reason for this. And the reason is security by design. And what do I mean when I say that? Well, I mean, for the most part, security by design is being ignored, fully ignored as developers create these APIs. And it's putting companies at risk, and companies like you, people like you, are giving us a solution and a reason to a way to protect ourselves from that. So I thought it'd be good for us to set the stage and talk about exactly what an API is to get this conversation started. So let's get into that. And since APIs make up about 2/3 of the breaches in the cloud that we're hearing about in 2021 at least, probably going to increase this year, let's talk about them.
Yeah.
And so APIs, application programming interfaces, they're basically nothing more than a non-human interface that allows one system to talk to another system in an agreed upon way, predefined agreed upon way. So Adam, in your terms, what does this mean? What is an API and how big of a problem is this today?
Well, absolutely, it's a big problem, and we'll get into that, right? But one thing, the example I like to use that is most common with people is just think of Netflix. Netflix is an API-based application. What does that mean? Well, it means that whether or not I visit Netflix on a browser, or my Roku device, or my smart TV, or the back of the headrest in my car, I get the same look and feel for that application. When you think of a smart TV, I can't go and click a refresh button. I can't go and click a back button, but I can continually scroll through that application and all of my recommendations just magically appear. And that is an API application that makes that call. It fetches your recommendations, brings those back, and so you're constantly seeing new content on your device, even though you're not requesting anything like a traditional website, clicking a link, refreshing. One of the very first ones that I used all the time was the Gamecast app for ESPN, right? A single API call would go out and refresh that score. I'd get those up-to-date minutes and up-to-date scores and touchdowns or whatever, but I didn't have to interact with the browser to make that happen. And that's exactly why we see more and more API-based applications today. Is one, we have a multitude of different devices now that are connected to the internet. And then second, it's just automatically fetching that data. I don't need to interact and be clicking a mouse or interacting with the keyboard to make that happen. Now, that's exactly why we have a problem, is because we continue to push out these applications, and the solutions that exist in the market today, the traditional security solutions, are not meant to protect these type of applications, non-browser based style applications that access sensitive data, access my profile. I'm purchasing stuff across, these devices, and all of that is transmitting sensitive data. One of the things that Gartner said was by the year 2022, that API breaches would be the most popular of all attacks. All attack traffic would be APIs. They came out about 6 months ago and said they were wrong. It was actually the year 2021.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. We were seeing some of that. Yeah. That's,
Yeah.
It's funny you say that because I noticed when we went to DEF CON this year, that was the primary topic.
Yeah.
It's almost like they planned it that way and said, you know what, we're going to focus this entire event around API security.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Exactly. Yeah, great insight there.
All right.
I think it's interesting too. So kind of we usually roll a B-roll to kind of build the suspense of how critical this topic is. So I'm going to add my own flavor to that B-roll. Here it is. So APIs influence everything, not everything, but the majority of the things we interact with today. If you think about how much we use our phone and the apps on our phones, those apps are connecting to the Apple Store is connecting over an API. Your bank account, API. Your trading platform, API. All of those critical resources are all APIs that you're communicating with. And when you're communicating over those APIs, you're expecting as a user that there is a high level of security protecting your data over that transmission, right? But you don't really know. You just expect that. Well, here's the
you assume that.
Yeah, here's the backstory to all this. I've been writing APIs since before we even called them APIs. I wrote APIs when web services wasn't even really known what web services were. And IBM rolled out a Skunkworks project to try to do these web services, what they had called web services back then. And I started programming with it, trying it out, and built some tools with it. Soon, web services took off, and web-based APIs, not just DLL-based, hard APIs, but web-based APIs were being used. But I could tell you, the last thing we ever thought about was having to secure those APIs. We didn't need to back then. This was 1995. That's how long ago it was, right? We didn't need to back then because security wasn't an issue like it is today. The biggest security issue we worried about was credit cards. Am I going to use my credit card on the internet? Oh, I don't think so. It's not secure enough for that, right? That was our biggest concern back then. And then Y2K was our second biggest concern. So the last thing we worried about was API security. Now, think about the number of applications that are in multiple industries that were written back in the 90s and the 2000s, even if you just start in the 2000s to today, without security in mind. There are a number of APIs out there that don't have that in place. And so what we're asking a lot of people to is to go back and look at that API security, run vulnerability scans against their code, evaluate their code, make changes so that you meet certain provisions and conditions around security and assure people that you are meeting those guidelines for security. But I think it's still slow to take effect across multiple industries. And as such, you're running into an issue where there is a huge amount of vulnerabilities, a wide open door for hackers to just walk right in and start taking information or, hack a system. So I think we have a long road ahead of us to try to get this thing locked down, and it's not going to be easy.
No, absolutely. Absolutely we don't. And the thing that hurts us here is that businesses have to continue. I mean, there's always a pressure to move faster, to release the mobile app a day earlier, to do one thing faster. And I constantly come up against teams where, the development team outnumbers the security team 50-1. It's like, most recently I was working with a client that had 1,000 developers and 30 security engineers. Wow. And I was impressed they had 30 security engineers. I was like, that's amazing. But you're still hosed. Like, you still have no hope. Against 1,000 developers releasing code probably 60 times a day, there's no way you're going to be able to keep that secure and understand what's been changed in your environment.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah. So
most developers do things their own way too. Each one has their own fingerprint that they like to put on the way they write their code and the way they develop. Even if you are doing application code testing, like the OWASP type testing, like you said, that's probably only a piece of the puzzle as to some of the things you can do to secure APIs.
Yep. Yeah, and Adam, you said a good point there about where a company's focus is, right? And even the developer to security professional ratio aside, companies for years have always only been focused around driving revenue. And to your point, get that product done and out the door as quickly as we can, and we'll move on to the next thing. And it was all about rapid coding. A lot of the methodologies around development were formed around how do we develop things faster, not how do we develop things more secure. And
how do we meet those deadlines?
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so now that we're into the point where we're trying to make that message clearer that you can't wait anymore. That you could have waited all these years. Your grace period is past. Mm-hmm. And it is now time for you to take action on making security upfront and personal to your organization. And I think that's really what you were saying too, is that, there's always been something else taking its place.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And we just continue to see, and it's an old cliche, right? This is something that has been in our industry for a long time, that, the security engineer's role or the SOC analyst role is almost wishful thinking, right? They're always understaffed. outnumbered, and they have to be dead on all the time. They have to be completely spot on because an attacker gets lucky once and you're in trouble,
Yeah.
right? So you can't miss anything. And it's just become one of those things where, as an industry, the security solutions have not been, um, I want to say automated, but have not been as helpful. We haven't helped the SOC analyst really improve his time management and be able to consume all of the different alerts and attack traffic and various solutions that are out there to really make their lives easier.
Yeah.
And this becomes compounded when, now we're dealing with API-based applications, which move at an infinite faster rate than what the traditional web app used to be. Gone are the days where it's like we're redesigning the website and we're going to have a new rollout in 6 months. Now it's like, hey, we just added this credit card API, and now you've got 3 different login pages when you only had one before, because now we've got a mobile API login flow, and now we've got a smart TV login flow, and now it's like, at that point, the security team just almost throws their hands up in the air. I think the highlight here is just that everything is connected now. There literally isn't anything that I couldn't get to from anywhere else in the world, and especially with healthcare. The amount of medical devices now that connect to your phone and can get real-time updates. Anything there is almost free range now and free game, and definitely with the connected cars and we're just now getting into the attacks that those that are going to come across those tools and those devices. It's just the way it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very interesting because one of the next things that I was hoping we could get into was 5G and the Internet of Things, because that's going to expand in front of our eyes incredibly over the next decade. A lot of people don't understand how much 5G is going to really be a game changer
Yeah.
in our lives. You think about technology growth and how quickly things like that can just take off. The first smartphone, the first iPhone, has only been around for 15 years. And so look at the amount of growth that's happened just in that 15 years. And with 5G, 5G was created to fix a problem that 4G had all along, and that's density. You could only have so many devices connected in a certain area without, using up all the bandwidth, basically.
Congestion overload, right?
Yeah. You think about, fans in a football stadium where there's 100,000 people. 5G is going to solve that problem. No big deal at all. I mean, with 4G, I think it was 2,000 devices that you could have connected in about a little over a quarter square mile. And with that was 4G.
Mm-hmm.
With 5G, you can have 1 million devices in that same amount of space. So 2,000 versus 1 million.
Yeah.
So how exponentially is it really growing in front of our eyes? And then that's just density. That's not even how much faster it's going to be. So 5G is going to bring along this massive influx of new technology, of new devices. You mentioned smart medical devices. Smart homes are going to be another avenue for attack. And there's a huge problem with this. With all these new devices and all this new technology that's going to be flooding into our world to make our lives easier.
Yeah.
There's only one issue that comes along with it, and that's a huge attack surface for the hackers, right?
It totally is.
Huge.
And I don't know, how much some of our listeners will have looked into the 5G protocol and the specification for how 5G is authenticated. But at the core, it's just OAuth, which is a very commonly used internet protocol. It's how different 5G how different mobile providers are interacting, switching networks, switching the calls, interacting with each other. We're going to see, I really think we're going to see a kind of like a broken communication access control OWASP top 11, right? Number 11 come
Yeah.
out here soon, because
Yep.
it's exactly what it is. And in the heart here of 5G as well, it's input validation, which is a very commonly overlooked aspect of security that always raises its head here in APIs, where there isn't proper input validation. And if one partner isn't implementing the spec correctly, then all of a sudden you're going to be open for API attacks in the 5G protocol itself. So for me, this is a very interesting topic. It is something that I've looked in to, and I've had opportunities to speak with those that are writing this spec, and it's something that we will need to keep our eye on here, because I think, as we talked about here, just with the connected cars, that's going to be over 5G. And if the protocol isn't protected itself internally, and if that vendor has missed something in their implementation, then you're vulnerable, and it could be fairly drastic when we think about the devices are going to rely on 5G. Yeah.
Yeah, most definitely. And you're making a good point there about input validation, because that is where it starts. That's at the very beginning of this vulnerable point, is how well do you validate the input without leaving any space for there to be a margin of error, right? This Jimmy, he completes the set of credentials 95% correctly, and that's good enough. No, it can't happen like that. It has to be 100% according to spec, or it doesn't go at all. Because if it's anything short of that, it's an entry point for someone to just tweak their way through and slide into something that they shouldn't be doing. And the second one that goes along with it is this whole cycle of tokens and tokenization, and using tokens and getting valid tokens on a request. Because if you don't have the right input validation to begin with, you might issue a token to someone that they shouldn't get, right? They shouldn't get the token. And then subsequent to that, if you don't utilize tokens as a way to expire a communication, right? Then you can also create a scenario where you have an open entry for an attacker to take advantage of things. So there's a lot of nuances associated with it.
No, and I'm glad you mentioned the token thing there, because that's super important that that those tokens are in place, that they're using strong algorithms, because when you think of 5G, a lot of this is going to be over really unsecured networks. You're not going to be able to say, from where I'm located till I hit the cell tower, that everything isn't going to be, that somebody couldn't be looking for that traffic, right? And who knows, even if what kind of, I'm hitting the right cell tower, or that cell tower is one, it's not a spoofed access point or something, right?
Yeah.
So you're not going to have really secure transit for the most part across cellular connections, and so you've got to have strong authentication built into those applications for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. It gives a whole new meaning to man-in-the-middle attacks.
Yeah,
sure.
that's exactly what I was thinking.
It does.
Or drive-bys. Right?
I mean, when I'm walking around DEF CON, right, I'm always scanning for these rogue cell towers that all of a sudden pop up, and it's like you're half scared to connect to anything. And that's really how it is with cell networks, right? We never know what we're connecting to for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, it's just common knowledge if anybody's been out there before. Just don't connect to anything. Just turn your stupid phone off if you can. Right?
Just airplane mode for 3 days.
Yeah, right. Or get a burner and just have fun with it. Who cares?
So let's review. In our discussion, we covered security by design has been ignored, resulting in many years of code in existence with huge vulnerabilities. 2/3 of breaches in the cloud are API breaches. APIs allow one system to talk to another system in an agreed-upon way. multiple types of devices can communicate over the same API. And Gartner said that in 2022, API breaches would be the most popular attack type. They recently came out and said that they were wrong. It was 2021. We also discussed 5G changes the game from 2,000 devices to 1 million in the same density space. 5G creates a huge attack surface, which can ultimately overwhelm security professionals to keep devices secure. Following this specification exactly and requiring accurate input validation is key to protecting APIs over 5G. And the usage of tokens with expiration and rotation is super important to protecting API communications, especially over 5G.
Adam, I wanted to give you an opportunity to speak to some of the bigger breaches that you know of that you've been able to learn some things from.
Yeah, excellent. So, there's two that come to mind. One of the big ones from last year that really opened up, I think, the security industry's eyes to APIs as a whole was the Experian breach here, where a security researcher found that there was an Experian API that could be accessed directly without any sort of authentication. And if he just entered in all zeros, they just entered in all zeros to the birth field, that would return the person's credit score. And so you could literally just go through, people's names, put the name in, zero out the birth field, and you're going to pull back somebody's credit scores. And what's interesting here with this one, and this is something that is extremely prevalent that I've seen, is it was, technically you could probably call it a third-party API. Meaning it was an API that they had made available to some of their partners to do credit pulls and to say, hey, is this person really able to go rent this TV or whatever, right? And those third-party APIs constantly prove to be the most vulnerable. Oftentimes, the provider of those have to, don't want to say dumb it down, but make them simple, right? They have to be even more simple to integrate with the third party's way of doing business. And this is where we see the wheels come off. There should really never be an API that is public. Whenever I talk to my customers about this, hey, you don't require any authentication on this API. This would be like going up to your bank account, your bank, and clicking login without putting in a username and password. And voila, you're logged in. To somebody's account, it may not be yours. Just click login and it works. Oh, how easy is that? And another one that I've seen here recently, and this is something that just resonates with what we see a lot in the fintech, is we're so comfortable now taking a picture of a check or a rebate check or something. Nobody goes to the bank to deposit a check. Well, we were working with a smaller bank, and all of those pictures of those checks was on an open API. So if you knew the API, you could literally just start at account number 000001 and enumerate all the account IDs and return any of the checks that person took a picture of. Wow. And of course then you've got a good idea of what account maybe you want to target because they're depositing a lot of checks, right? So all kinds of things like that just are on these public endpoints. And to maybe take it a step further, this is the reason why. It's because you have 1,000 developers, and out of those, 1,000, even 100, we'll dumb it down to 100 developers. You have a team that is responsible for maybe the authorization and the authentication of the API, but then you have another team that just needs to create the application. And they don't test, they test use cases, they don't test abuse cases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And oftentimes when the team publishes the API, if the authorization team isn't like, we know that that's coming, the pipeline is publishing it into the right part of the gateway, well, then you have broken authentication all over the place. And lots of times people are like, man, like, why do they let that happen? Like, where's the checks? And it's like, it's so easy. It's so easy for that type of an attack or vulnerability to just get exposed very easily. It's not.
And do you think that easy is all about just the developers don't care, or do you think they're just not knowledgeable of these vulnerabilities, or is it even more simple than that? I mean, why is it so easy?
Teams don't talk. It's a breakdown in communication in the development process, and things happen way too fast in the development phase now. You
For
have
sure.
to get things out. I work with customers that have 50 to 60 API updates a week. And if you don't have a super tight development process, you're just going to keep pushing out code. You're going to release it. You're going to meet your deadline, and you're going to go home that night and sleep well. And then
Yep.
then it becomes the security team's problem.
Yeah.
Um,
And to your point,
yeah.
though, input validation, right? In both those cases, 000 zeros anywhere, a non-valid number probably isn't a good idea.
But Jason,
Situations like that happen. Even to the earlier statement when you were saying, developers, they'll build this thing. It could have very well been in some cases, not in those, but it could very well be in some of those cases where the development team is building something to build out and theorize how this is going to work. Get it in someone's hands, have them validate, yep, this is how I want it. And then they say, okay, well, then let's go live. We're ready to go live, right? And they're pushing to take this thing live. And developers are like, okay, we're taking it live, right? And they don't go back and think about those other pieces that they need to have in place. That's why things like automated vulnerability scans of your code is so important. Even automated testing is so important because those two pieces are keys to finding little bitty things like this, especially in a rapid development cycle, to finding keys like this to not let them slip and get pushed out to the public.
So true. Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to double down here on exactly the thing here with Experian though, is because off the code here, really it's going to scan the application. It's not going to really detect, hey, is the authorization live on this endpoint, right? That's almost something that has to come from like an API gateway or maybe some type of authentication mechanism that usually exists outside of the application service itself. So you got to have that there, and that's why we continue to see broken authentication, the broken object level authorization attacks of the API top 10 just proliferate all over the place. And oftentimes it's really impossible to detect in your environment. There's the security tools of today are not focused on that. They're looking for the SQL injection, cross-site script style of traditional attacks that we've heard for so long, right? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and input validation.
Input validation. Exactly.
Back to that.
Yeah, exactly.
Back to that one.
Exactly.
Well, Kevin, Adam, I think this has been a great conversation. And as I was sharing with you guys earlier, it becomes very hard to keep these conversations into bite-sized chunks of really good information because we just want to keep talking about them in detail. But this has been enjoyable. I'm glad we had you on, Adam, and you could share some insights into what you've seen out there and your experiences. I think we've added a lot of value to our listeners and viewers around APIs, and I hope that they will all leave this conversation with something that they didn't know, and I'm sure they will. And be able to implement some things to help keep them a little bit more safe, even if they're not in IT. So with that, we want to thank you, Adam, for being on this episode, and hope that we can have you back again later and talk maybe into some more technical details on some of these things as we discover new vulnerabilities over this year that could be interesting to cover.
I'd love to. Happy to be here and can't wait to come back.
All right.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. We appreciate what you're doing for the industry. We appreciate what you're doing to help keep companies safe. And we're glad you're one of the good guys. You're on the right side of this stuff.
Thank you.
So thank you for that too.
You're welcome.
Hello, everyone. If you enjoyed the podcast today, I'm excited to share with you that you can now listen to us on all of these major streaming platforms. Also, if you learned anything from the conversation today, please share this episode with your friends, family, and colleagues. The more of this knowledge we can share, the more cyber secure we all become. I'd say like, subscribe, and all of that jazz, but hey, you're not morons. You know that. I will leave you with some words of wisdom, though, from the former director of the FBI, Mr. Robert S. Mueller III. He said there are only two types of companies, those that have been hacked and those that will be hacked. You guys be safe, remain diligent, and take care.